Welcome to the Outsiders, episode 2 podcast, where we talk about Ultimate Frisbee news 10 years from tomorrow, or at least that's the idea. But before we get into 10 years from tomorrow, we need to know what's happening today. I'm Tony Leonardo, along with Tushar Singh. Tushar, tell us about yourself and how we started this podcast.
Thank you, Tony. We started this podcast because both you and I talk a lot. We talk to a lot of people quite a bit around the world. We've played around globally. We've played high level, low level, no level. And no matter what, we talk to people where we go. And those conversations end up being very interesting because we inevitably talk to people who are actually changing the sport, developing the sport. And we thought we'd bring some of those conversations to you and really look into the history of the sport with those people as well as where it's going. And I think, tell us about today's guest.
Yeah, so one of those conversations that I've had is with Irv Kalb. He is an inaugural member of the Hall of Fame for Ultimate Frisbee. He is one of the pioneers of the sport. Started playing at Columbia High School in 1970. He is the class of 1972 at CHS. His name is on the rules of Ultimate Frisbee from the time. He then went on to co-found the Rutgers Ultimate Team, where they completed 4 seasons and they lost 1 game in that time and won 3 national championships. That's where he met Stork. A legend of the game, Irv Kalb, and excited to really connect with him. I don't think a lot of people might know who Irv Kalb is, so we're gonna bring Irv to the masses. Tushar, that's what we're here to do.
But first, we start with the news. I think this might be one of our themes that we're getting into last time around. Our news was the Frisbee name. But the news, the most important news today is the reaction to our last episode. And if I just look at some of the comments that we got on our YouTube channel, if you're listening to this on Spotify, we are also on YouTube. We do a lot of screen sharing, things like that, 1 episode in. Really, we still don't know what we're doing.
It's amazing stuff. I've watched it multiple times.
Oh, so that's why our view count is
probably.
So a first comment we have is a great stuff. Thank you. Second comment, great stuff. Thank you. And
that was actually the comment.
Is also great stuff. So
yeah, great
unanimous,
stuff.
Great stuff.
I think that just goes to show you that what we're putting out there, I think just everybody's copying each other, honestly. There's just like that guy said great stuff. Patrick Vandervalk said great stuff, even after Brent Russell said great stuff. So
speaking about great stuff, there was legitimate news last week, aside from the Frisbee name that we didn't get to just because we wanted to keep the episode fairly short. So we're going to try and get through some of that pretty quickly right now so that we can actually get to the interview. So those of you who know me know that I like to play a lot of Beach Ultimate, and Canada finally is going to have a Beach Ultimate Championships, a national championships. This will be held in April in Vancouver. So we don't know what the weather will be like, but it should be pretty good.
It'll be like Paganella weather, actually, right?
Oh man, Paganella, I remember 20 degrees first day, snow on the beach, third day.
Yeah, exactly.
Or finals.
Yeah.
So it won't be like that just because it's Vancouver. At least we hope it won't, but climate change, who knows?
Okay, fair.
So the second big news, also Canadian Ultimate this week, was that we're also finally going to have a GM, Grandmasters National Championship. We haven't had that. Canadian teams have been going to the US quite a bit when they've been able to qualify to play in Denver. Phenomenal facility there. This will be held in June in, looks like, Saskatoon.
Holy Moses.
So it could be a bit cold as well. we don't know, but it is the farming season. The weather should be good. And a number of teams from across Canada have already expressed interest. In other beach, European championships are going to happen at the end of this year. But related to the conversation we had with Manisha last week, Tony, tell us about the WUL.
Heck yeah, look at this. They're going through the Mega Fan jersey right now. You cannot get one of these if you're a player. So just take a note on that. Only for fans, only fans, Mega Fan jerseys. I don't know. They look pretty sweet to me. I mean, I mentioned it to Manisha. I was like, your designs are off the charts. So these look pretty wild, pretty dope, pretty awesome. I don't buy jerseys anymore, Tushar, because I am old and I don't need them, and I'm not going to look fresh and fly wearing them. But I do encourage everyone else to do it. 50
So,
bucks. Wow, that looks amazing.
so one of
Ooh,
the
the biggest
interesting things
one.
about these jerseys is it was posted on Twitter that Twitter X, whatever you want to call it, that the funds from this go directly to the teams in order to actually support them throughout the season and get
Yeah.
them better flights, start times, a whole bunch of things that make a better quality product. And as players, we know that you do want to arrive to a tournament rested or a game rested to have your best performance.
Can you go back to that screen real quick for a second? One part on there that I was reading that I really like kind of gravitated towards is scroll down a little bit if you can, Tushar. A little bit more. Why are these priced differently? Your purchase of a mega fan jersey or shirt helps to fund your favorite team and the season. Historically, women's sports have been underfunded and underexposed. The Western Ultimate League is here to build a decades durable infrastructure that pays athletes, coaches, and support staff what they are worth. But right now, we're building from the ground up. This limited edition merchandise is just one way we're working towards a profitable, sustainable, professional sports business model. Tushar, I think that just goes back to why we wanted to do this podcast, because this is very forward looking, right? I don't think that some of the leagues really were thinking this far into the future, like the WL has been successful at doing, and trying to be sustainable as an endeavor, as a business, to stay afloat and to encourage fan participation and get an excitement. Really, I mean, you got to do all the things, and this is just one of the things that they're doing to try to stay relevant, focused, awesome, and build a league for the future.
And that was one of the things that happened came out of that interview last week, which, in case you haven't seen, go look at episode 1. And what happened in that one was we got a little bit more insight into the actual business and how they were operating it. Not too deep, but enough to understand that they've learned from the commercial successes and failures of other leagues and are looking to develop something, as you said, that is sustainable and a high level quality commercialized product from the get-go.
And look, I'll tell you some potential, I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but hearing from a WUL insider, there could be a potential this year WUL versus PUL game, single game match in July. So that's breaking news. You heard it here first. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I know they're talking about it. So I don't know. I think that everyone wanted to see that last year, to see Raleigh versus Seattle. So maybe we'll see it this year. That'd be pretty cool.
It's pretty exciting, especially to see that crossover. I know that we've tried, or other leagues have tried, going all across, the United States, and there's been significant travel expenses. So having these regional leagues seems to be the way to go initially, but that crossover will definitely build quite a bit of a rivalry between the two. But moving on to the UFA, I think you had some questions. You had asked some insiders some questions about Frisbee and will there be marketing promotion? And you had some other questions you'd asked.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is so Frisbee again, Wham-O. Is Wham-O going to come into the sport and help promote it and help market it? I think the jury's still out. Everyone I talked to, we don't know. I don't think so. So maybe they'll see how it goes. Maybe they do get into it a little bit this year, but it doesn't look like that licensing deal. And this to me is an error, perhaps, but maybe it's still a little too soon. But it doesn't seem like that licensing deal between the AUDL and Wham-O and the name change came with a marketing and promotions budget. I personally speaking, I think if that's true, it's a failure. I see it right now. When we broke the news last week, no, we didn't break the news. When we responded to the news, there was one article in Forbes that Adam Zagoria wrote, who's a longtime insider for Ultimate Frisbee, about this happening, and I haven't seen an article since. So the failure to even court the press about this name change, to me, is not getting it. It's in New York City, it's okay, you hire an ad firm, or you talk to an ad firm, or you You get some publicity. You make sure that people know that when something significant happens, that the word can get out. And they didn't seem like they did that. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing. So moving on. Let's see. Current news. Tushar, just today we are recording on the 28th of January. I just watched a little bit of the end of this game. It was a pretty darn good game. UBC women's were up 12-10 on Carleton in the semifinals at the Santa Barbara Invite. Carleton comes back to tie it at 12s. The game clock starts running down. I think it's about Universe Point. Looked like some clock time was left. UBC gets the goal, 13-12. The game ends. Unbelievable match. Both those teams look really good. A lot of great players out there. And to me, it felt like that maybe this is like a preview of finals in the women's division for college. So I think I don't know. That was a cool game to catch. So that's Canada taking one over Minnesota.
I mean, it's incredible ultimate out of the Northwest, and consistently UBC, UVic travel to the US, and we have some of our best players coming out of the Northwest as a result of that. I would very much like to see, the other college teams, university teams here in Canada do that, but it doesn't seem to be they're getting to that point. And but that rivalry that we're seeing as well, UBC, Carleton, those players are going to be seeing each other when they go up, right? When they're no longer in university college and they're playing at that next level. So these are long-term rivalries that we're likely to actually see.
Yeah, and we know the pipeline between Seattle and Carleton. So, half that Carleton. Well, some of the new additions to that WUL Seattle Tempest team came from Carleton when they graduated from that Syzygy team. Yeah, definitely. And if you're in Seattle, your rival is just a little bit north of you in Vancouver. So for sure. Yes. That tournament that we're referencing, Santa Barbara Invite. Tushar, when do you think the Santa Barbara Invite started?
No clue, Tony. You got to tell me.
I don't know either, but I do know that the 1980 Santa Barbara Invite was sponsored by Coca-Cola. And in 1980 and 1981, that was, again, one of these years where those playing Ultimate thought that this was going to be the year that the sport finally broke through. That didn't quite happen. So without further ado, let's get to our next guest, who I believe played in that 1980 Santa Barbara Invite. That would be Irv Kalb. Again, he played in the first ever game of collegiate ultimate in 1972, Rutgers versus Princeton, as one of the captains of the Rutgers team that won that match. Irv Kalb, coming up next. And Irv, you've told me, we talked about this, like this is something that you kind of saw and your group and really that whole class of 1972 from Columbia High School. I don't want to say everyone, because some people didn't necessarily want to see it go professional or weren't convinced that one day this could be going to the Olympics. It was more like a fun game that they played, and obviously all had a fun time. But as we're looking at the 1972 New York Times headline newspaper article from your first college game, Rutgers at Princeton at Rutgers. But you did take it seriously, and you did push it far, and here we are today. Is that something surprising to you?
Well, it's surprising in the way that it's turned out, but I'm very happy the way it's turned out. I was always of the opinion, and the original group from my group very much had the vision that this was going to be big, that it was going to be a sport that was going to be on the level of baseball, football, basketball. We saw that it had all the elements that could make it this kind of a popular sport. Plus, the big attraction is that it's non-contact. So
yeah,
certainly interested in a sport that we didn't want to get hurt on. I'm sure you're familiar with the early days that we played on a parking lot.
Yeah.
So, you couldn't play a game of tackle Frisbee on a parking lot. So the fact that it was non-contact was a huge part of it. And from our point of view, certainly not from Wham-O's point of view, but from our point of view, it was extremely low cost. You literally, all you need is one Frisbee and a couple of field markers and you're ready to play. It may not be at a professional level, but in order to just play a pickup game, that's really all you need. So we believed that it had the potential to be a huge sport.
And it's kind of borne out that way. I mean, it's gone global. It still has its grassroots appeal, and its grassroots where anybody can play and pick it up because of those qualities, right? Like you don't have to have the referees. You can kind of play it everywhere. You only need one disc. It's sort of like self-explanatory almost in a way. 1 point is worth 1 point. You get it across the goal line. There's a lot. But at the same time, it never did break into this like, okay, it's the next great big American sport. We never got onto TV. The sport never really got some commercial backing. It never really made money. And I don't know if that's a failure or is that a feature or a bug?
Feature.
To use that language in Mountain View that they would.
The Mountain View language, sure. I don't think it's either. I think it's just a matter of not having the right people to do the promotion the right way. I dropped out of it many years ago, and I don't know if I don't know who has been involved. I don't know if those people were the right people to push it in the way that the original vision thought that it could go. I still think it can get there. It's just a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. So it may be a bug that people haven't done the right thing. That's a tough question to answer. I mean, if I was in charge the whole time, I would have gotten it. We'd have professional Ultimate on TV every Thursday night or Monday night or whatever.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so I've thought about this for a little bit. Like if you really had been able to stick with the sport, and I think we'll ask you a little bit of what happened. Obviously, you were injured on the field and not taken out of a game, and then had a lifelong injury from that, sustained from that on-field accident. You weren't around to help bring the sport forward in that manner. But thinking about it, the people that you know, and for folks that are just kind of tuning in, along with Stork, Dan Roddick, and Tom Kennedy, you three translated sort of the way the game was played at the original parking lot into what became the spirit of the game rules that was written into clause, that was written into the rules. That was written by you, TK, and Stork, as we're looking at one of your original early rule sets from 1971. Your name's on there as well. So, but those three, you're out of the picture, but Stork and TK are still around. And obviously TK starts the UPA in 1979. He's still kind of one of the leaders. We can't forget Michel Pizzoli as well, and others. So it seems like it would have been in good hands. I don't know, or was there some opportunities maybe missed in the early 80s to commercialize or get the sport onto TV and to professional leagues?
It's a good question, and there's a lot of time between the early 80s and now the 2020s.
Okay, good point.
And there had to be room for growth also. I mean, the sport essentially started to become popular at colleges in the 70s. So there needed to be some large number of teams in order to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
So at that point, Irv, you're talking like, and it's kind of evident, like you're saying the history was there. Was there passion to grow the sport though? Like amongst you and your colleagues, but in a specific direction towards commercialization? Or was it a passion to just play?
I would say somewhere in between those two. It wasn't about commercialization. Commercialization to me means making money off the sport. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to spread the sport so that as many people as possible could enjoy the sport the way that we were enjoying it. So we wanted to spread it just because we thought it was something that people would really enjoy. Making money off of it was never a concern. Never thought about that.
I would think that's the same. That was you and probably TK and Stork, right? Like you all shared that sentiment.
I would think so, but you have to ask them. I don't want to speak for them, but we never talked about anybody making money off the sport or how that would be. At the time when I was involved, it was all about what can we do to expand the number of players and codify the rules so that they were clear to as many people as possible.
Let's go back to that real quick. Shar, with the rules, can we look at that rule set again real quick? So this is the third edition, right? 1971, 72.
That's the first one that I worked on.
Yeah. Okay. So your name is, obviously Joel and Buzzy and John Hines had kind of penned the original rules. They wrote then the mimeographed what is called the first copy, and then they made a pamphlet just like this that would be the second edition, and then this is the third edition, and your name is in there. And a couple notable things that I want to show on this. One is the registered R by Frisbee, so you got the permission to use Frisbee from Wham-O. And two, on the backside of it, which I don't know if we'll see, there's the R for Frisbee. So it's interesting because, here we are, that's from 71, 72, and now here we are, 2024, and it looks like that's coming back, which is remarkable. And then you have it in the inside, copyright CHS Varsity Frisbee Team, Richard Denberg, Irv Kalb, and Joel Silver, 1971. So, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you own the copyright to the rules of Ultimate Frisbee still?
Again, it's a good question. As far as I know, I do. I was in charge of writing the 3rd through 8th editions. And I don't know if anyone has attempted to try to get a copyright after that. So I don't know how long copyrights exist anymore. Is it still 75 years?
So this is really interesting too, because you dropped out of the sport after your injury. You had to stop Ultimate cold turkey.
Right.
And Joel Silver left the sport, and Richard Denberg was never really part of the sport. So we essentially have 3 names on there that you never bothered to find out if you still have the copyright to this game that you have the copyright to.
But it's not important. I don't really care. There are people who took over after I finished the 8th edition. What are we at now? Is it like the 12th edition, 13th edition? I don't know what it is, but certainly there were people who were responsible and took over after I was done in the 8th edition. And I've seen new versions of the rules, and they all seem fine to me. I don't have any problem with that. Nobody ever asked me for my permission to come up with new versions of the rules, but again, I'm not upset about it. I think it's great that other people have stepped up. The fact that I put a copyright on the 3rd through 8th editions doesn't matter to me.
Wow. Okay.
If you look on the front page of that 3rd edition, you'll see, I think down in the bottom right, well, first it has my picture in the front.
Yeah.
Me, jumping my twin sister for a catch.
Let's go back to that, Shar. Wait. So this is, this is interesting in another sense too, because we're talking about the Ultimate Frisbee Association now, and that's the men's professional league. But from the very beginning, this is you, your twin sister. There's a couple other girls. You always played mixed. You played whoever wanted to show up was welcome to play. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Whoever wanted to show up. Didn't matter.
So girls, boys, rhinoceroses. I mean, if they could throw the disc properly, which they probably couldn't.
It's hard to throw without thumbs, but yeah, we let anybody who wanted to play. In fact, I just had a recent email exchange with Joe Barbanel, because I had forgotten what we did back when we were playing in high school. We went 19-0 against other teams.
Yeah.
I said, we had a large team. You know, we'd have 25 people show up. I asked them, how did we regulate our team? Who went in order to ensure a victory? And
Yeah.
he said, oh, what we did is we picked our top 7 players. We put them in for like the first 5 points just so we could get the lead. And then we split up whoever else we had into separate teams, and they would play for 2 or 3 points, and then we'd rotate in a whole nother team, and then we'd rotate in a whole nother team, and we would just keep rotating in people so that they could get in the games. So
Ooh,
everybody
this is cool.
showed up.
All right, Irv, check this out.
Yeah.
Got to zoom in on this one.
Yeah, this is an old Richmond Avenue gang. Actually, this is when we first started. The original group, my group was the Richmond Avenue gang, and we were a football group. We used to play touch football. And one day we heard about the sport. One of our guys from our group had seen these guys playing ultimate frisbee down in the parking lot at Columbia High School. Told us the basic rules, and we literally decided to go out and play on that day out in our street. This is Richmond Avenue. Larry Schindel and I and Steve Freeman is probably in this list somewhere. We all lived on.
Can you scroll through the names? Let's see if. Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah, Steve Freeman right below my name. So we started to play. We played the game that day, and we loved it. We really enjoyed playing it. We actually played in a hailstorm, and I remember the hailstones bouncing off of the frisbee as we threw it down the street. And eventually, we went down and met the original team. And then we took over from them. So we became the CHS varsity frisbee team.
This is an amazing list here, because this list is, first of all, like half that list is in the Hall of Fame, either just straight up or as the Johnny Appleseeds. There's a number of folks on that list who I'm pretty confident are going to get into the Hall of Fame soon. And it's really diverse. I mean, there's a lot of women and I should say boys and girls that are on that list. So how did that come about?
Friends and friends of friends. A lot of it came from the computer area. And we were very fortunate at Columbia High School that we had one of the first computers that was available for high schools. We had an IBM 1130 with 8K of memory. And a bunch of us learned how to program in the Fortran programming language. So a lot of the people that were in this group were either doing programming on the computer there, or friends of the people who were doing that, or boyfriends or girlfriends of those people. And it was just very, very well connected group.
So it was one of the perhaps most well-funded high schools in the United States at the time. Was it the nature of the high school as well that promoted a discovery and essentially incubated, or could it have started at any high school in America?
The sport as opposed to the computer stuff.
Yeah, yes, the sport. Yes.
The school had, except for the absolute beginning, the school had absolutely nothing to do with the sport. You've probably heard the story that Joel Silver was part of the school council, and they ran out of things to talk about at the school council meeting, and he stood up. I wasn't there, but this is the story that he stood up in the thing and said, "I move that Columbia High School look into playing a frisbee game." Playing a frisbee game here at Columbia High School, and somebody seconded it. So they had to vote on it. They voted on it, and it passed. It turns out that later we found out that he had learned the sport at another place in New Hampshire, a camp in New Hampshire. But because they voted on it and approved it, they had to go out and do something about it. So they had the first game. It was like the student council against the school newspaper, where they played the first game. But after that, there was, as far as I know, there was no support from the high school at all. We called ourselves the CHS varsity frisbee team, kind of as a joke. The whole thing really started as a joke. So the varsity Frisbee team. But we were not Columbia High School, we were CHS. So, as I said, there was no support from the high school. Not that we wanted it, we weren't asking for it. We just chose those letters in our name.
Your senior, your junior, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So, what was the mentality for? Well, there's two different mentalities here, right? We know that the originals, right? Johnny and Joel and Buzzy and Fred and a lot of these guys. There's a lot of them. Marty Berman was in that list, I think, or might have been in your group too.
You're right.
Joe Staker, Gordon Chang. They didn't really stay with the sport because it was kind of fun to them. But you don't hear those names go forth. Johnny, of course, did, playing in that game, 1972, the first ever college game, Princeton versus Rutgers, of which you're the captain of Rutgers. Johnny was one of the captains of the Princeton team. But your group, 1972, that whole list we saw from the Richmond Avenue gang, you took this sport at face value and you said, let's make this a sport. Is that correct? Let's continue. Let's push this forward and make this a thing that's going to stay.
Absolutely. It's a very different vision. The original group saw it as kind of this joke thing that they just had fun doing. They made up a sport and they just enjoyed playing it. Whereas my group, when we took over in 1970, we had a completely different vision. Our vision was that again, just what I said, we enjoyed it so much. We wanted other people to have the same experience that we had. So we wanted to push the sport. We wanted to expand the number of people who were playing it. And the way that we generally did it was that we started with other people that we knew at other high schools. A lot of it was through scouting. Many of us were in scouts together. Larry Schindel and Steve Freeman and Robert Evans, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. We were all in the same Boy Scout troop. So we knew people from other Boy Scout troops, and we contacted other people at other high schools. We started to get other people interested in getting them to start teams. So we had our first league back in New Jersey, which we called the New Jersey Frisbee Conference. And I published a schedule of different games were going to be played.
Hold on a second.
In the high school.
Were you allowed to? Okay, let's talk Frisbee. So
I was the commissioner.
Commish. Do you still have permission to use that word Frisbee? Because it sounds like you just went forth and called it Frisbee, and I don't know. I'm a little skeptical that was legal.
I have a letter from the Wham-O company where they are giving me permission to use the word Frisbee on my clothing and any printed material that I wanted to use it on. So, and they said just as long as you use the registered R. So, yes, we have CHS Varsity Frisbee. The big word Frisbee is there. It's on the rules. It's on our shirts. I went to Rutgers. We had Rutgers Frisbee, and we had the circle R there. So yes, I have permission from Wham-O to do that.
Yeah, so I wonder if that I wonder if that's still valid. I mean, I wonder if we can go. Hey, it's like, hey, you wrote this 40 years ago. This is, the rule. It's right there. We see it. It's right there.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have a question then. So, what was that journey? How did you connect with Wham-O? How did you get permission?
That started with Joel Silver. Joel Silver was the one that contacted Wham-O originally about the sport. And again, his vision of it was that it was kind of this joke sport. Oh, we're using a Frisbee. We're playing a team sport. He contacted the Wham-O company, and they wrote him back, and they exchanged letters. Didn't do much. The only thing I remember coming out of it was that they sent us a prototype of the fastback Frisbee because they didn't understand what we were trying to do, but they sent us one. They wanted to see what we thought of it. But when that group left in 1970, 71, and went off to college, we took over for them. And I was the captain of the team, and Joel wrote to the people at Wham-O and said, Irv is going to be taking over, and he's the person who's going to be the main contact from the CHS group. So I started writing them and telling them about what we were doing and how we started this conference and how we had the first high school game, and I think it was 71. Sent them press coverage about it, showing that we had played the first inter-high school game. And then at some point, I just asked them. I asked them for permission. Honestly, I don't think I need that, actually. I think anybody can do that if you put the Circle R on it. I don't know if that's a legal issue at all. So it is or was a registered trademark of the Wham-O company. But I asked for permission, and they wrote me a letter back. Some vice president, maybe Bob Payne. I'm not sure. I don't have the letter in front of me. But they said you can use this letter as permission.
I'm still, I think we'll get into this, but going further down the line now into the 70s, now, Rutgers versus Princeton happens, and that's a big deal. You got a lot of press. The Sports Illustrated covers. You're on the ABC News in New York, covers it live that night. It's on election day. It's in the New York Times. There was 2,000 people at this game. It was a big deal. And that's a lot of people at that in 1972, and getting in the New York Times in 1972 is not easy. So really remarkable, and you run with it. You get yourselves, eventually you move out to California. Stork goes out to California to work for Wham-O. Stork, of course, is in that he was one of your Rutgers teammates. Great success. You win your 4 championships at Rutgers. And now you're also move out to California. You start to work with Wham-O as well. You and Stork tour to do freestyle. You do other events kind of with Wham-O, but sort of your real love is still with Ultimate. And you have some conversations with them to try to promote Ultimate. Now they bring Ultimate to the Rose Bowl. You have some demonstration games there, but I've seen the programs. I've seen the footage, and here's a snapshot actually from one of the programs. I think you're on the far left of this image here.
Yep.
And
yep.
Stork is in that bucket
on the right. Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know who's pulling, but
that's Mark Dana.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah. Yeah, famous Ultimate Frisbee player. And I think he did a little bit all around, right?
He was more a freestyle player who got recruited to play Ultimate in this demonstration game.
Okay. But at the end of the day, they didn't really say like, oh, okay, we got a sport here, let's roll with it. And they did the same thing in disc golf. They wanted guts. They wanted individual events. Frisbee was a toy. Dogs got popular. What was that conversation like with Wham-O? And what were they, why didn't they jump on board this and say, you know what, we're going to run with this. We're going to get behind it. We're going to promote it, and we're going to make something happen.
Well, things did change quite a bit when Dan, I call him Dan because I knew him Dan before he was Stork. Yeah. When Dan Roddick moved out to California to take over, he became the head of the International Frisbee Association, the IFA. And when he did that, we all breathed a sigh of relief that we had our guy. We had somebody essentially at the Wham-O company who understood what the sport was. He understood what the appeal was. He understood what the potential was. So it wasn't really a conversation anymore with Wham-O. It was, we've made it. We've made the connection with Wham-O.
Okay.
So we didn't have to push them anymore because they understood what was going on. And if you remember 5 years ago in San Diego, I talked about the history of what happened. And this particular Frisbee, this is the 165G, which is the one that we were playing with at the time.
Yeah.
This was our breakthrough, that on the back of it, it has essentially the rules of Ultimate. I don't know if you can see that, but it has a rough version of the rules.
You're going to have to open it right now.
Oh, okay.
No, just
and that's what we were after. That we looked at the packaging and we said, here's this Frisbee, and what we want is we want the Wham-O company to say, if you buy this Frisbee, this is what it's for. This is why you're buying it, so that you can play this sport. And what better way to get people to know about the sport than to put essentially the rules of the game on the box when you buy it. So that to all of us was a great victory, and that's a big thing that Dan Roddick had a huge hand in getting done.
You know, and that did work, except I guess one thing to think about is that in that model release, and I've seen this, and I know you have as well, right? There's that line of discs, as you, if you would call it that, has, I think it's distinctly 4 different ones, and one says for freestyle, and it's signed by some of the freestyles. One's for all around play, and one was for disc golf, and one was for, you know, guts, and one was for ultimate. So it's like, you know, we were just one of the many avenues they were pursuing to try to sell these discs.
Well, I've always said that something I learned from a good friend of mine from way back, Victor Melafronte, who said that Frisbee is a form, just like the ball is a form. And you can play many different sports with different balls. Baseball and basketball, they're both balls, but you play very different sports with them. So we saw the Frisbee as a form, and the different Frisbees that were being made were good for different sports. So if you wanted to play ultimate, this was the Frisbee for ultimate. Slightly smaller one was one for freestyle that Dan Roddick and I won a world championship with. We also used a pro model. My team from Southern California won 2 world championships in guts Frisbee using the pro model. So different sports, different sizes, different weights. I was never any good at golf, but I know there's a whole big thing in golf now where you use many different sizes and weights for different throws. Sure, I understand that. But we wanted this particular model for our sport. We wanted to promote the sport with this particular model.
Continuing on, Tony, do you want to talk about the book?
Oh, what, this one? I got this one here. This is a good one. Fundamentals of the Sport.
Oh, you mean this one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Just happened to have. What would you like to know?
Yeah, well, I remember this is a pretty good one. You know, check this out. Actually, you told me the story about this. All right, Tushar, this is not in the script here, but Irv, you told me about this illustration you guys did, right?
Yeah.
And that in this illustration, we all recognize modern players: a hammer, a blade, and some other topper throws here. But you're telling me when you did that illustration that no one actually had thrown a hammer, and then you just drew that there, assuming that someone one day would throw it that way, and that maybe it would work or not, but it just looked cool for the illustration. Is that right?
Absolutely true. I mean, we knew, at the time we were throwing forehands and backhands, although we had the original group used to throw backhands and overhand wrist flips. But that's a whole nother story. But when it got to this picture that you just showed, we were throwing backhands and forehands and steep ones. We didn't call them blades at the time. And we had come up with the concept of the hammer throw. But at the time the book was published in, what was the middle 70s, I think, or late 70s, no one ever thrown it in a game. It was one of those things where we said, someday this might be a real thing. So let's just put this in. We had a really good illustrator, and we took pictures of 5 different positions of the same person throwing his different throws. And the illustrator was able to take these and merge them into one picture, which we thought was a great picture, a great drawing. But it had never been thrown in a real game. We were visionaries at the time.
Well, you're visionaries in a lot of ways. This book has so many elements in it that are still used today. The triangle throwing drill. You talk about empty, flow. You have you talk about empty space and filling the space and bubbles of space. This one's pretty cool. How you're on defense, you're like, this is the area that you want to like force the team into, because that's where you're defending. You had some really, really interesting concepts of, and of course, I'm bearing the lead here as the originator of the zone defense and ultimate. You get some credit for that as well. But tell us about how much strategy you put into this book that you and Tom Kennedy wrote.
they were all concepts that we had developed basically at Rutgers. It was Dan Roddick and me and a whole bunch of other people at Rutgers that we came up with different ways of playing our offense and more so playing our defense, our zone defense, which I'll talk about in a second. But we certainly, the main concept that we had was what we called the V. And the idea was that from the thrower, because at the time, the marker always stood right in front of the thrower.
Mm-hmm.
So we considered that the area directly in front of the thrower created this V concept that you couldn't throw directly into the V because the marker was right in front of you.
Okay.
So you had to go into the V and then out of the V, and that's where you're going to be able to get open and get a pass. These days, people will guard you on the side and they'll force a throw one way or the other. That never happened while I was playing. But at the time, it was just the V, trying to get people to go into the V area and cut out of the V area. And if you weren't open, to get out of the way so the next person could come in and get their pass. So while the book at the time had a lot of new concepts, I'm very impressed with all the new stuff that other people have come up with. The whole idea of the stack, horizontal stack, vertical stack, diagonal stacks, forcing in, or I forget what it's called, forcing in or forcing out, break side, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Those things were not part of our repertoire back in the 70s. So I think those are great. I think they're great developments at the time, or from that time. The big thing that we did at Rutgers, I tried to do this at high school, but the high school team, first, we didn't need it.
Right.
And secondly, it just didn't go over to be able to play a zone defense. So I had seen a lot of, I was a real football fan when I was young, still am. And I really got into zone defenses in football. So when I was in high school, I proposed this idea of zone defenses in Ultimate Frisbee. And we weren't able to do it in high school, but when we got to college, I said, I'm going to do this in our college team.
Mm-hmm.
And develop the 2-3-2 zone at Rutgers, and we used that to kill many teams. And we even developed a variant of it. We played against Cornell, and one of my old teammates, John Cohn, was the captain of the Cornell team. He was just killing us. He was an incredible thrower. On the spot, we developed the cone zone where we had 6 people playing zone defense and 1 person on him all the time. Man on man on 1 person. It's like a box and one in basketball.
Yeah.
So, I've even thought about developing new zones. I think about this every once in a while, the O zone and other concepts that I have in the back of my head for some future date. Get it in the Olympics.
And living through that 70s Frisbee phenomenon, was there a sense that like this was going to break through and this was going to become a really big deal, like to everyone, or that it already was and it was inevitable?
Oh, we knew that it was not big at all.
Or the opposite.
We had 1 team in our high school, and then we got expanded to, I think, 8 teams in our local.
What about the late
school.
70s?
The late 70s, we made the push through college, which I think was a really good thing to do. It wasn't really thought about our plan is we're going to go from high school to the college and then take over the world. But the expansion in college was very natural. The whole Johnny Appleseeds. Many people from Columbia High School went to different colleges, and we made this pact to try to create a team at the different colleges we went to, and then schedule games between them. So it was a very natural growth. It wasn't really planned that way. But then the way that we saw it was the next big thing was to get the connection with Wham-O.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked very hard at trying to get that connection. And when Dan got there, that was a big breakthrough for us. And then from my point of view, it was just more of codifying the rules. I wasn't involved in pushing the sport anymore. Tom Kennedy had started the UPA. So that was more of the the place where the impetus was to spread the sport. So I wasn't involved much in the UP other than knowing, living right by where Tom was. I was in Santa Barbara at the time. Just to finish that. So
Yes.
I still think there's a huge amount of growth that can be done and a huge amount of recognition. I mean, I'm not a marketing guy, but what I think is needed in the sport is a marketing person. So somebody who will take the sport that's already there. The product is already there. It's just that somebody or some group of people, I would love to have some group of people turn this into a marketing mania. Make it so that everybody in the world knows what this is.
Wow. Here comes
type-
Wham-O coming back in.
Great. Wonderful. If they can pull it off, if they have the right people to do it, wonderful. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Nope, that goes right into it. So the two arguments are marketing, and Wham-O can help bring this sport more recognition and bring it into the mainstream. And the other side of the argument is, why didn't your group, why didn't the group after you, why didn't the group that Tushar and I grew up with, why hasn't anyone, except for small pockets of people, gone out and said the way this sport is going to grow, become popular and mainstream is by teaching the youth? And by youth, we mean 5 to 10-year-olds. Did that ever cross your mind in the 70s when you were moving forward, or, or not?
No, that didn't occur to us at the time.
Yeah.
We were too busy playing. I think that's the answer, that most people who are really into the sport are into playing the sport. And that's where you get the real thrill. Like getting out the field and running around and making great plays.
Yeah.
And I think this is just my opinion, there's not many people who really think about the growth of the sport and what could be done to make it be a mainstream sport. And certainly, teaching people at a much earlier age is a great idea. And I know there's some groups that do that, but on a very small level. That's the mainstream thing.
So again, that has persisted. Like we are a group of everything that essentially was part of what your group was living through and pushing out to the world in the early 70s out of CHS is almost still true today, whether it's the makeup of the people, which are kind of like smart kids, they're, gender diverse, they go to good colleges, mostly white. They're kind of smart. We already talked about that. And they love playing, and playing is the utmost of it all. And they love to get other people to play, and they're happy to get people to play. But the aspect of commercialization was never there. The aspect, these are good things, teaching the youth wasn't necessarily there, because they're, it was, you wanted to play. You wanted to get out in the field and play. And you guys played all the time. You played 7 days a week at that parking lot. So it's just amazing to me that is still who we are today. It's amazing.
It's not something that was thought about at all at the time. And the only teaching the youth thing was that we would be happy to teach new players when they came onto the team, when they came onto the field, and they came down to see what was going on. Come and join us. We'll teach you how to throw. We'll teach you how to catch. We'll teach you where you should run. We'll teach you the different throws. We'll teach you how to play defense. But the concept of teaching it at an elementary school level or even a junior high school level, that's not something that we thought about at the time.
Irv, in the early 80s, you suffered this spinal cord injury, right? Unable to play, and had to leave the sport. If that didn't happen, where do you think you might be in the 1990s or the 2000s and ultimate? Where do you think you might have gone with it? Where might you try to take in the sport or try to push the sport towards?
Well, two very different questions. And like one, I certainly would have played a lot longer. I had this big back injury. I ruptured a disc in my back. And while I tried to continue to play, I couldn't play at the same level that I was able to play at before. And I tried for a couple of years, and I just said to myself, I'm not having any fun. I can't compete at the same level that I used to compete at. Then I have to walk away. So I walked away from the sport. Literally did not watch it, did not go to see anybody play it for many, many years. Until I had kids. And then I started teaching my kids how to play. My son plays all the time now. But if I hadn't had this injury, I certainly would have played a lot longer. I would have continued to play. There are some people who, from the original team, Joe Barbinell, Ed Summers, they are the same age as me, late 60s, maybe even 70 by now, and they are still playing. I don't know how well they play, but they seem to be in pretty good shape, and they're still playing.
Yeah. I played with them. I played with them at the parking lot. We played a game of boot. They can move. They know their angles. They can throw. Absolutely, those guys can play.
Well, I would have liked to have been able to do that. But you know, if I had been still connected to the sport, I would hope that I would have gotten much more into the promotion of the sport. You know, at the point where I felt that I couldn't play anymore, I would have gotten more into the, again, not what I would consider commercialization. I was never into it for the money. And while I own the copyright to the rules, I must have made probably $2 off of people sending in the 10-cent contribution for the rules. But so, you know, I never made money off of the sport. I was not interested in making money off of it. It wasn't my goal at all. It was, like I said, it's more about getting people to get the same enjoyment out of it that I did. So I probably would have gotten more involved in the promotion of the sport at a commercial level, to say it that way. Some ways to get the people and to get the people who matter about spreading the sport on a much higher level than just word of mouth. So trying to get a contract with ABC for the Tuesday Night Ultimate or whatever it was.
So Irv, on that, we've had more than 50 years now since you first started playing. What would your vision of the sport be for the next 50 years?
I really thought about that, except for one important one is getting it into the Olympics. I have no idea what's involved in getting into the Olympics. There's all kinds of talk of there's corruption in the Olympics, and that's a big reason why we're not in the Olympics. But I don't know anything about that. But I think that's a huge thing. I think if it were in the Olympics, it would be very successful as an Olympic sport, and I think that would expand the reach of the sport greatly. That people would watch people playing the sport and enjoy watching it both as a spectator and as players. I think the sport has both. It has player appeal and it has spectator appeal. I think there's huge potential in the pro league, the Ultimate Frisbee Association, as it's now known.
Yeah,
I think it's great. I've been to a number of the local team. Originally was called the San Jose Spiders. They played at a field very close to my house, so I used to go to their games all the time. And the crowds are great. They're not huge, but they're very vocal. They're very understanding of the rules. I hope that gets bigger and bigger. I hope that there's stadiums filled with people watching the sport, watching the pro leagues. I know that there are college championships. I think one of the things that's great about the sport is that there's men's, women's, and mixed competition. You don't see that in football or basketball, or main sports these days. I think there's a great area for growth in the mixed competition. So I would like to see that expanded further. 50 years from now, I'd like to be able to, if I'm still alive, I'd like to walk into the Hall of Fame and see the physical Hall of Fame and see all the stuff from the original days.
Hey, thanks for watching our interview with Irv Kalb. He is somebody I've known and talked with for so many years now. He's a very key figure for the documentary I'm working on the origins of Ultimate. And Tushar, what did you think of the interview that we did with Irv? He might be a little bit new to your world.
Yeah, I think that was incredibly insightful, especially the book where we think about many of the concepts and we learn many of these concepts and we think of them maybe as newer, but turns out they were there almost right from the beginning, which to me was quite interesting. And I learned quite a few other things along the way. Tony, thanks for setting up that interview.
Yeah, for sure. Special thanks to Irv. He joined on without hesitation. Hey, thanks for watching our second episode of The Outsiders. We're looking forward to bring you more cool stuff, and we'll keep Chuck Cleary as far away as possible from you. So don't worry about that.